What's up, everybody? Welcome to the first ever live edition of the Black Agenda podcast. As always, I'm your co-host, Devin Dito. And Adrian, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Exactly. So I'm super excited, nervous, but still excited to get to do this live and let people kind of get to know us and what we think. So just a quick introduction. So we've been doing this since about the midway through June, and so we've been covering different topics. We've talked to different experts and different leaders throughout the country, and we decided to finally make this live to bring it to you in a different format and be able to explain things that are going on. So our focus today is to really talk about the news from this week. So that's going to be, what happened to Jacob Blake in Kenosha, the RNC, and just really where does the election stand, where does the country stand, and kind of bring you our opinion and what we think, is going on in the country and explain it in a way that everybody can understand. So we're going to kind of get right into it. And right off the top, of course, as you can see, we want to talk about what happened in Wisconsin and what happened with Jacob Blake. There's a lot of, the reaction has been emotional because people really honestly are tired of seeing stories like this. And so we saw again another, black man shot by police 7 times this time. And he's lucky. Honestly, it is a miracle that Jacob Blake is still living. And his attorney and his family has said he's going to be paralyzed. but at least he does still have his life, because we've seen this play out many times where the person on the other end of the gun doesn't make it. And so what I really wanted to do to start off is just kind of explain the series of events of what happened in Kenosha and what led up to what happened to Jacob Blake. So Adrian, you can kind of start it off and kind of give us a rundown of what happened.
Police were alerted by the dispatch that Blake had an active warrant from May due to domestic
Not
cases.
not to interrupt you, Adrian, but if you could start just for the time, it looks like they couldn't hear you. So I turned you up. They should be able to hear you now.
Okay. All right, good.
Sorry
I'm glad
about
we
that.
got this live. No, I'm glad we got this live session so we can make sure everybody's got it going on now. All right, so yeah, so let's go back to the beginning. So at 5:11, dispatchers were notified of Blake's address complaint with some family trouble. Blake wasn't supposed to be there, took the keys, and then he wasn't given the keys back. So at 5:11, police were alerted by dispatch that Blake had an active warrant from May due to domestic cases. 5:13, one of the officers assigned to the case asked dispatchers for a description of Blake. The dispatcher tells officers that the woman now says Blake is trying to leave. The dispatcher tries to get a description of Blake's vehicle, but she tells officers that the woman has become uncooperative and the type of vehicle or what state is registered in are unknown. The officer replies that he has arrived at the address. So now we're at 5:14. Second officer arrives at the scene. So now we got two. And at 5:15, we got a third officer urgently radios dispatcher asking for more officers. So we've got the dispatcher sending in more officers, and now we got three more squads coming. Around this time is when we see a lot of the videos and the bystanders starts doing the cell phone video. So that's just another little tidbit, listeners, while we're doing this. It's important now that everybody's got a cell phone, everybody can be a part of the media to actually take advantage of what's going on, because there are missing details here and we can kind of see that. So less than 2 minutes have passed since the first officer arrived. Different video. This one shot by a neighbor in a second-story apartment across the street shows the scene from the driver's side. 3 officers, 2 male, 1 female, have their guns drawn and behind Blake as he walks from the sidewalk to the front of the SUV. The 2 male officers follow Blake closely, aiming their guns at Blake as he opens the SUV doors. As Blake attempts to enter the SUV, an officer grabs his shirt, then shoots him in the back at close range. 7 gunshots can be heard, followed by the car's horn. A woman then follows the SUV and screams. Now we're at 5:15, so notice not a whole lot of time has passed. An officer reports shots fired. Another officer tells the dispatcher radio traffic should go to a restricted channel so the public cannot hear. The dispatcher asks if all the police officers are okay. An officer at the scene tells the dispatch, "We need rescue ASAP." So there's a lot that's going on here. And as you can see, not a whole lot of time. I think that was about 4 or 5 minutes within this scene. So Devin, I'll let you go ahead and pick it up there, because this is a lot to digest.
It really is. And what it describes to me, hearing you tell that story, is not as clean and cut and dry as we would like it to be. I mean, like you say, this happened within the span of like 5 minutes. It went from they arrived on the scene, they tased him twice. The next thing you know, he's walking around in front of the car, leans in, 7 shots rang out, and the next thing you know, it's plastered all over social media, and we're witnessing what, Dr. Shanette Garrett Scott from On Miss called just simply murder porn. And we see this replayed over and over with George Floyd. We had 9 minutes of witnessing him lose his life on the street in Minneapolis. And so people are honestly just tired of seeing stuff like this happen. And so that's why you see the reaction being riots and protesting, because they felt like they've protested for years now. Nobody's listening. Everybody comes out and says, oh, we believe Black Lives Matter, but there's no action behind that. And so people are tired. And so they're going to voice their opinion to get your attention. And we've tried protesting. And so now we're just going to go out in the street. We're going to tear stuff up, set stuff on fire. I'm not condoning that, but we cannot ignore the reason why this is happening, which is that, when it comes to being able to subdue a black suspect, lethal force is usually the way to do it. We've seen videos of white people being able to use a machete or fight an officer and disarm them and run away, and they end up living through that situation. But a black man, and you can say in this case that Jacob Blake could have been a threat. An officer didn't know what he was going to get out of his car. And that's perfectly true. But Jacob Blake didn't get the benefit of the doubt. Like, we have seen video after video of white people who get the benefit of the doubt, and their life matters enough to that cop to say, I'm not going to shoot you, man, with a machete who's trying to stab me, or a man who's fighting me on the ground tussling. I'm not going to shoot you and kill you because I think your life matters. Black people don't get that benefit of the doubt. We get shot 7 times, and then people, want to put and pay attention to the rioting and call that out, instead of actually focusing on the reason why this happened in the first place.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it was Ari Melber or Joy Reid on MSNBC. They did a great little segment about what you're just talking about, where, Jacob Blake wasn't really a murder suspect, but we had, the shooter in Charleston, South Carolina, who, was a murder suspect. And I mean, I think there was a report where they got him Burger King or something like that. It's just so insane to me that you've got this double standard to where, I get that we don't know the facts. We don't know, because I think there was a report that there was a knife in his vehicle when some of the bystanders said there wasn't. So we don't know that. But at the same time, I think that if our officers are supposed to be trained to protect, then a knife shouldn't be a threat to them to say, I'm going to shoot you 7 times and kill you. How about you disarm him, shoot him in the leg or the arm, 1 time, so that knife can, fall out of his hand or something like that. It's definitely a double standard, because when you look at on that night on Tuesday, the 17-year-old, that the other story, if it's not enough to add the fact that we have yet again another black unarmed man who's been shot by an officer. We've got a counter story of this, where we have a 17-year-old, Caucasian kid, Kyle Rittenhouse, who shot and killed 2 people, and he's just walking around with a rifle, waving to the law enforcement. And to me, it's just very appalling. As I was watching this and hearing about this story, it was upsetting to me. I mean, obviously African American, so I'm right there. Every time I get in my car now, I'm almost scared to even put it in ignition, because I don't know if a cop's going to shoot me. It's a shame that we have such a double standard in our country.
Exactly, and Kyle Rittenhouse, who you were talking about, this is a 17-year-old kid who was given an AR-15 by his friend. This is what his lawyer said. His lawyer said he was given an AR-15 by his friend. Now, Kyle Rittenhouse is from Illinois, so he's from a whole other state. But he crossed state lines, not with the gun, but when he got there, his friend gave it to him. And then Kyle went off to what I believe to play police, to try to be a vigilante and enforce the law. And that's how people are justifying it, saying that he shot those 2 protesters in self-defense, forgetting the fact that Kyle shouldn't have been there in the first place. Kyle is not police. He has no legal authority to go out and enact justice on people. You want to protect, to protect businesses from looting, but that is not your job. We don't need people with AR-15s going to a riot, armed to the teeth, threatening people because they're looting. Let the police do their job. If you think the police aren't doing enough, that's okay. But they are there for a reason. We have militarized our police for a reason. We sell millions of dollars worth of military equipment to local police departments to take care of situations like this, and they were there. We don't need more Kyle Rittenhouses. But the fact that this is being justified is what kills me, because it's going to create more people just like this, who see a situation like what's happening in Kenosha, they're going to say, you know what? You see how they justified Kyle Rittenhouse? He was doing the right thing. He was just trying to restore order because the police wouldn't. I'm going to go do that next time if they protest in my city. I'm going to go out there and brandish my long gun and my AR-15 and try to enforce the law. And if I end up shooting somebody, oh well. You know, I stopped them from looting.
Yeah.
We don't need that narrative on top of a situation that's already combustible. You have a president who stated during the George Floyd protests that when the looting starts, the shooting starts. People like Kyle Rittenhouse heard that and said, you know what? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to carry that out. When the looting starts, the shooting starts, and he killed 2 people. And you can say they chased him and tried to disarm him. But the fact is, Kyle Rittenhouse shot somebody in front of a gas station first. The protesters chased him down the street. And yes, they tried to disarm him, even though they themselves weren't necessarily armed. They tried to use anything that they had in their way to use to get the gun away from him. Because you don't know what's on Kyle's mind. You can say, yes, he's running towards the police, but he could turn down and spray down everybody right there. And you don't know what's on his mind. We have seen mass shootings carried out, not to stereotype, but seen mass shootings carried out by people who look like Kyle Rittenhouse. So you can't blame them for seeing him as a threat and saying, you know what, we're going to try to disarm him before he kills anybody else on the street. And the fact that he was able to walk up with his hands up to the police and they didn't deem him as a threat is just, I mean, it's ridiculous because had he been black, that story would have ended much differently. We have tons of video footage to show that story would have ended much differently had he been a black man walking down the street, having killed 2 people with an AR-15.
Not to mention, Devin, you know, you can hear in the video people saying he shot somebody. You know, you've got a lot of people who are just trying to voice to the law enforcement, hey, I get that Wisconsin's got this open carry rule, that's another debate that we could go into, you know, or you can have some sort of deadly weapon like this just walking around flaunting it. But you've got people literally telling the officers, this guy shot somebody like that. And you even see that the vehicles going down the street where there's dead bodies, but there seems to be that there's nothing done to go back to him and point to say, you know, what are you doing with this gun? People said you killed these people, like, you know, handcuffed this guy. Like, what is going on here? It's, you know, it's sad. I mean, we're at a point where I just don't know. I don't know if people are afraid of it still. I don't know if people think that we're trying to come in and burn down their communities, disrupt their businesses, take over their schools, kick them out of their suburbs. I don't know what's going on. Black Americans, we're just trying to live. We're just trying to have life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That the Declaration of Independence said that everybody's created equal under God. We all have those alienable rights. We're just trying to get those same benefits, but we keep seeing, you know, month after month. I mean, this is what, I don't know, Devin, what, the 4th or 5th one just this year alone. I mean, it's just crazy to me that we keep having this national conversation about race relations, and unfortunately our leaders are not stepping up to act on it.
Yeah, and that's the sad part, that we have a president who really honestly doesn't care. He is at no point tried to be empathetic or sympathetic towards what the people in our communities are feeling when they see things like this play out. I can understand if you believe that there just aren't that many black people killed by police in a given year, and that the real problem is black on black crime. I believe that we're able to focus on 2 problems at the same time. And it's possible to say, right, like you can walk and chew gum. Like, we're a nation that can focus on 2 problems at the same time. You can be against police brutality and also be against black on black crime. Like, they're not mutually exclusive. But people act like they are, and I think the reason is they don't want to acknowledge the conditions that exist in a lot of our communities, because that leads to another conversation of what this country has done to us over the years to lead to this moment. We didn't get here by accident. This was constructed and it was very calculated to ensure that the neighborhoods that we live in were not great, where our schools were underfunded, there was no economic opportunity. The riots we're seeing today are no different than what we saw back in the 60s, and that was after the passage of the Civil Rights Act. And the Civil Rights Act, and the reason those riots happened was because the Civil Rights Act, as great as it was, didn't address the economic conditions that existed in our neighborhoods. And those economic conditions still exist. You look at the cities around the country who have high rates of crime, they're mostly, they have a high population of black people and just minorities, period. But if you go back to the 60s, it was the same way. So in a lot of ways, things have changed, but they also haven't. And so, of course, when you get a people like us who have been just forgotten over the years and expected to just pull yourself up by your bootstraps without actually having boots to pull them up with. Like, people want to just imagine that after 1965, we just all started from go, and they just don't understand why black people haven't moved. And the reason is, our leaders have done a disservice to us. They've ignored our neighborhoods, and they want to move in people now with gentrification instead of actually helping the people who live in those neighborhoods first. Instead of moving new people in, we need resources. Just like a lot of white people got resources to move out to the suburbs, we need resources to help people who live in the inner cities. And that's what's missing. And as long as we ignore that problem, you're going to see more cases just like Jacob Blake. You're going to see more protests and more violent riots. It's going to repeat itself. Like, this is not a surprise when you ignore people who are trying to tell you what they actually need.
And one thing, viewers, I think it's really, really important to express, because I think that what you see is that a lot of people on the Republican side are just trying to point to the defiance, the looting and the riots and the burning, and say that the protesting is not lawful. We need to do this law and order message. But the deal is, and again, Devin and I, we're not trying to justify people being violent, but what do you expect when people have been ignored, when people have been doing peaceful protesting and they haven't been heard? That's what you expect. So leaders, the message is, you got to wake up, you got to listen, you got to respond. If we're wanting to de-escalate our cities, if we're wanting to fix our violence, if we're wanting to end this chaos, then you have to step up. You got to start listening to people, because if we keep seeing the same thing, cops killing unarmed black men, brown men, doesn't matter. If we keep seeing that, then we're going to just keep going over this cycle. So one of the things, we're going to take a quick little break here and come back and talk about it, but I'm glad that we see a lot of momentum going on nationally to actually cause some change and bring about some action. So what we're going to do, we'll take our first break here, and then we'll be back with you.
All right, welcome back. So we're going to continue our conversation about what happened in Kenosha. In particular, this time we kind of want to switch gears to the response, really from athletes and pro stars in the WNBA, the MLB, Major League Soccer, even NHL, and the NBA have all really come in a unified position to boycott games because of what happened in Kenosha and the shooting of Jacob Blake. So this was all orchestrated initially by the Milwaukee Bucks, and they're in Wisconsin, so they're not far from Kenosha, Wisconsin. And so, of course, they saw what happened, and they saw the rioting, and so they said, you know what, we're not going to play basketball today because there are other things that are bigger than basketball that we need to focus on. So if we're not going to focus on trying to fix the problems of black communities, they basically said, we're not going to play basketball. We're not going to let you watch sports and get your escape like you want to. We're going to remind you and force you to pay attention to what's going on in our communities. And so this was huge, and I don't think this has ever happened before, where the NBA and the WNBA essentially came to a full stop that night. Like, I remember getting the notification, which is shocked that they weren't going to play basketball, period.
No, I agree with you, Devin. You know, I in a capitalistic society, this is powerful. You know, people have been talking a lot about, you know, the NBA's power and, you know, the NFL with Colin Kaepernick, how major sports have tried to take more of a position to actually stand up for some of our social issues. And it's awesome. You know, I'm very thankful to see this. I'm sad to see that, you know, whenever we talk about, and we're going to do a little bit more talking about, you know, the response from the White House, but particularly when we had the response from the White House about sports teams standing up for racial justice, you know, Donald Trump's response was, I think that the NBA is becoming too political. It's a shame that the organization has done that. And that's just sad. I mean, it's, you know, the players of those leagues are just trying to say, you know, you see us as athletes, you see us as entertainers, you see us as just people to watch on TV, to come to games and, you know, just, you know, to get away from you having to think about your life. But when we think about our lives, we're just still black and brown people. When we go back to our communities, people still see us as minorities. So yeah, you may look as entertainers or whatever, but we're still people. We don't have to just voice basketball, play basketball. We can voice police justice. We can voice prison reform. We can voice LGBT rights. Players are just trying to come up and say, you know, we're not just going to dribble. We're not just going to, you know, swat a racket. We're not just going to throw the football. We're going to take a stand, because if you want us to, if you want to make money off of us, then you're going to respect us. If you want to come and watch us play, well, you're not going to be shooting us in the back. That's all players are trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember that players are people too. We had an episode, I think it was earlier this month, talking about this very thing. So it's really funny how this all came full circle. But we talked about how athletes are using social media and their platforms to call out the injustices and to call attention to the conditions that exist that a lot of these players came from. And so you see players like LeBron James building schools in Ohio, giving, you know, kids scholarship to go to college. And so, you know, sometimes we forget that athletes live in the same world a lot of times that we do. And we have this misnomer, this misconception really, that just because they're millionaires means that they don't experience any kind of discrimination, or that they are just kind of immune to what's going on in their communities. And that's just not true. There's still people. They have families who are not millionaires, who live in some of these neighborhoods, who don't have the luxury of being able to just, you know, move out the neighborhood and move into the suburbs and get a big house and be shielded from what's going on. So they have a vested interest in making sure that their families and their friends who live in these neighborhoods get the proper attention. And so that's why they called it off. And there were talks of canceling the season. Personally, I'm happy they didn't, because I was looking forward to watching, you know, the finals and everything. But even President Obama spoke with some of the players and kind of advised them on what to do. I think President Obama spoke to, I think it was LeBron James and Chris Paul, and kind of guided them on what to do, getting I think it was a social justice committee started really kind of, giving them the steps they can take to ensure real change. And one of the really great things that came out of it is that the players asked the league to take the arenas that the players usually play in and turn those into polling locations. So these are going to be like mega polling locations where thousands of people can vote. And honestly, I'm wondering why we didn't think of that beforehand.
Yeah, it's great that we're in this situation. It's awesome that we keep going back to the late great Congressman John Lewis's mission about voting. It's awesome that his legacy, even though he's gone, we're still going back to his legacy and the importance of making sure that your voices are heard, viewers. This is an important, I think, Devin and I, we always, we keep joking about it because everyone's talking about how important of election it is. And every 4 years, people say this is the most important election that we'll ever have. And it's the most important one of our lifetimes. We keep saying that. But this is important, guys, girls, guys, it don't matter. This is important this year to make sure that you can vote. MSNBC has been doing the whole plan your vote. It's voting season, not voting day. And it's great that the league is helping with this because we know that there are a lot of people who are going to have to vote in person. Some people are going to do mail, but there's a lot of people who are going to have to vote in person. And turning these arenas into polling places or voting centers, that's going to be great. I mean, like Devin said, that's something we should have been doing already to make it easier for people, because when you make it hard for people to vote, you disenfranchise them from raising and speaking up their voices because, people got jobs, they got kids, they got to get home, they got parents that they're taking care of. So if you got to stand in line for hours upon hours to vote, you might not get a chance to vote. So I'm happy and proud of the league for doing this initiative to make it that more and more people can vote.
Exactly. And the last thing before we move to the next subject is that I believe Election Day should be a federal holiday. That way, everybody has the opportunity. They don't have the excuse of, well, I have to work and I get off late, because we know that that's a problem. And we know that polling locations in black neighborhoods are being closed down. There's a reason why you don't see lines that are hours long in white neighborhoods, but you see them in black neighborhoods. That is a strategic, calculated plan to disenfranchise people. That just doesn't happen in other neighborhoods, but it happens in ours. Our polling locations are the ones being closed down. So what you see are the players attacking the heart of that problem by making the arenas these almost like mega polling places to allow folks from all over to come in and vote and not have to wait 6 hours to cast their vote, which is ridiculous here in 2020.
Exactly. And before we go to our break, not to forget and not to go back to harping on the current occupant of the White House, but one of the things that come out was the recording where he was speaking with black leaders about saying how, when black people didn't vote in this past election, that benefited him. He was okay with that. And again, I know that, this segment was, talking about the NBA and things like that. But because we're talking about voting, I really want to make sure to talk about that, or at least voice that for a second, just because it's important to make sure that your voices are heard in this election. Don't think that, well, my one voice doesn't matter, I'm not going to go out and do it because it's just one vote. I mean, if you think that, maybe your friend thinks that, maybe your cousin thinks that, and then, you got a million people that think that. So don't let what, Donald Trump said in 2016 about us not getting out to vote be the thing that causes us to lose this election. So yeah, that's our little bit of nugget on that. And as Devin said, we'll go into our next little segment here of kind of talking about the Republican convention. Mm-hmm. And, Devin, I'm going to let you start off because I watched this thing and, I didn't have a lot of good stuff to say. And I tried to watch it as unbiased as possible, but it was hard. So I'll let you warm this subject up.
Well, I compare it to The Upside Down. So for folks who haven't seen Stranger Things on Netflix, I do watch Fox News from time to time. And so I always say, hey, I'm going to go watch The Upside Down to see what's going on, because that's what it's like. We live in a country now where folks really have created their own realities that just are built on falsehoods and lies. And they've created these narratives in these opposite realities that just aren't true. And I think you saw that continue with the RNC. I know fact checkers are working overtime this week trying to keep up with the falsehoods and the lies that are being spewed. You know, I thought I like the style of the Republican convention, seeing the speakers come up and speak live. I think having to take speeches was a little just kind of weird, even though I think Michelle Obama's speech was effective for the majority of them. It didn't work for me. But, you know, of course, Barack Obama's speech was great. If you compare that to what you saw this week, the speakers, they were okay. There were some weird moments. You know, you saw, I think it was Kimberly Guilfoyle. She was like yelling in an empty auditorium. So it was kind of strange. Some people seem to not understand you're speaking into the camera and not to like a crowd of people. But again, it's just a different reality. It's coronavirus is over. Donald Trump is not a racist anymore. He loves immigration. We're going to have a naturalization ceremony in the White House now to make it show that he loves immigration, even though his administration has worked to cut legal immigration. And in the same, you know, breath, they're over here trying to say that he loves immigration. He has demonized immigrants from the moment he came down the escalator and said that Mexico was just sending all of their rapists and murderers to our country. And so,
build a wall.
Exactly. Build a wall. And that theme continued this week, where now they've turned their ire and their focus on Democratic-led cities where there's just so much violence and so much mob violence. I mean, you have the governor of South Dakota saying there's no mother in this country that wants to raise her children on the streets of Portland, Seattle, or Washington. Those are cities in a Democratic state. And so I think I don't know if it was very effective. I don't know what audience, you know, really and truly believes that, you know, Democratic cities are just burning down to the ground. You know, we blame the protests and the rioting on Antifa, and there just wasn't any evidence to say that. You know, and I think what we need to stop doing also is every time we see people protest or get violent in the streets, we say Black Lives Matter. We have no proof that Black Lives Matter is behind any of the stuff that we're watching on TV. But we always assume, we find one picture of someone spray painting BLM, and we just assume that Black Lives Matter was there, they planned a protest and a riot, and it's their fault, and we lay it at their feet. And that's not fair. There are people coming from all over who are instituting and causing these riots and this violence. That is not Black Lives Matter. That's never been their mission. It has always been to peacefully protest, but you do get folks who are, you know, just trying to incite violence. And honestly, it may be people from the other side who don't like Black Lives Matter, who are coming in, going around, tearing up stuff to make it seem as though Black Lives Matter is being violent. And the narrative that you heard all week from the Republican National Convention was that the Democratic cities are on fire and they're going to come and they're going to destroy the suburbs. I mean, like, they were literally saying Joe Biden is going to demolish the suburbs. That's why Trump is talking directly to them. Black people live in the suburbs too. I don't get it.
Exactly. One of my favorite lines was with Mitch McConnell, whenever he said the Democrats are even trying to tell you how many hamburgers to eat. And, you know, it's silly to me, you know, that the whole 4-day mission was basically to scare everybody to think if you vote Democrats, they're going to tell you what you believe in, when to go to bed, when to wake up, when to work. They're going to jack up your taxes. They're going to send all of our troops overseas. They're going to get us in endless wars. They're going to burn down our cities. They're going to let all the rioting, the looting, all of that, you know, plague our cities. If you vote for Joe Biden, it's going to end the American dream. It's going to end American greatness. That was a whole theme of the Republican National Convention. There wasn't anything about what we're going to do going forward. You know, the only message Donald Trump had about moving forward was you hadn't seen anything yet. The best is yet to come. Well, Mr. President, what does that mean? Tell us what you're going to be doing. By pardoning 2 African Americans, that doesn't mean you're not racist. By you know, pardoning, you know, Susan B. Anthony, that doesn't mean you're not sexist. Just because you do these sort of signs of of regalness, that doesn't mean anything. You're just like I love not to always bring up MSNBC, but I do watch that a lot because I love Joy Reid on there, and she just basically said that that was a 4-day coronation ceremony. That was, guy who was wanting to be like Putin. Yeah, it was a guy who was wanting to be like Putin, wanting to be like Kim Jong-un, wanting to turn the White House into Donald Trump's house instead of the people's house. And it was appalling that the Republicans allowed that to happen. It was appalling that the Republicans said, we're going to be sycophants and we're going to put our lives on the line because it's more important that we gather together with no mask, no social distancing. It's important for us to showcase this reality that the American economy is really good, that we're not worried about homelessness, we're not worried about unemployment, we're not worried about millions of people with the virus, not worried about almost 180,000 deaths. None of that was talked about. None of the names like Jacob Blake, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, none of those names were even said. It's a travesty to have a party who's been taken over by such a person like Donald Trump. You even got from his sister to his niece, detailing how horrible of a person he is, how his family never said, Donald's a great dad, Donald's a great husband. You didn't hear anything about them talking about his character or his judgment or his ability to actually do and be a good leader. So the whole 4 days was a wash. I was glad that you saw the Convention of Founding Principles led by people like James Comey and Mike Steele trying to say, Republicans, we got to wake up. We got to take back our party. We got to change our platform. We got to get rid of this guy and everything about him.
Yeah, and the thing to remember is too, Trump and conservatives and Republicans are like different things. It's like there's Trumpism and Trump conservative and Trump Republicans, and then there are like normal conservatives and Republicans, and those are two very different people. And two groups, and so you saw that there was a counter RNC, like you say, James Comey and Michael Steele. Michael Steele used to be the chairman, I think, of the Republican Party, and they are on two different paths. And so Trumpism has descended into this, vilify, immigrants, vilify Democrats. I don't understand the line of Democrats want to tear down the country as if they don't live in the same country. Like, what would they get out of destroying the country they live in? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And Trump seems to not understand that we aren't stupid, so you can't sit there and spew out the same, this is Joe Biden's America. This is what's going to happen if he becomes president, as if Donald Trump isn't the man in the White House. This is your America. You created this when you said when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Nobody made you say that. Like, this is your America. You created this. You inflamed racial tension. And then you want to run to the corner and say, Joe Biden's going to be the reason why Democratic cities are going to be burned to the ground. No, it's because of you. You're the man in the White House. You haven't done anything to fix it. And so just kind of looking also to kind of move and look at where the election is. So we're through convention season. And so we're moving into the general election. We're about 65 days away now from November 3rd. And although Joe Biden is currently ahead by 7 points, Donald Trump was within the margin of error in the swing states. And this is exactly what happened to Hillary Clinton. She won the popular vote, but literally 70,000 people in like 3 states gave Donald Trump the White House. And so we cannot have a repeat of that. Joe Biden leads in like places like Arizona and Florida and Michigan. But if we don't show up on November 3rd, although I think we will, we can't take this check to the bank because it's not gonna clear. It's not gonna cash, because we tried this in 2016 and it didn't work. A lot of folks sat at home. They didn't want to vote for the lesser of two evils, and that allowed Donald Trump to get into the White House. But I think that this is going to be a little bit different because folks are just tired. They're sick of it, and they're sick of the lies and just the division that he's spouting. And we want to go back to a normal time, like when President Obama or even George Bush was president. Like, things were civil, at least. You didn't have the president trying to be a white supremacist and give people permission to go out and shoot up protesters. That's what we have right now. And we're going to, hold him accountable on November 3rd at the ballot box when we put him out of office. a lot of people think that that's what we need to do to get this country back on track. I'm not here to vilify Donald Trump, but Donald Trump had a very good opportunity this week to share his vision for how we were going to get out of this mess that we're in when it comes to coronavirus and racial justice. And he didn't give a clear vision. He just wanted to sit up there and vilify, the Democrats and not really sympathize and empathize with folks who are really still hurting and out of jobs. There was no message for them this week.
Yeah, and I mean, I will go out and vilify him because he took the opportunity of being president and he just tarnished it. And, everybody knows I've always said I'm going to run for president. I'm going to win. And when I saw this guy get into the White House as an outsider, I thought, okay, maybe he's going to help bring about some true change. But he didn't do that. Out of these years he's been there, he hasn't been, the American president. He's been his base's president. He's been that, reality superstar that he wants to be. So I don't know how y'all feel about him, viewers, but if you're going to be the president, you have a role to stand up and fight against these things, not incite them. Donald Trump, some people may ask, well, what could he have done to help with this racial tension? Well, don't send in federal troops to aggravate protesters or call the protesters, villains and thugs and, looters and rioters. Don't try to demonize them. Try to come and get law enforcement to sit down at the table. You could have some sort of summon. You could have, multiple meetings. You could call the governor board together and actually do some things. You can make Congress put pressure on them. There are a lot of things that a president can do to help bridge a gap between white and black America. It's just that with Donald Trump, he's only speaking to a small fraction of white America. Because I will say that I have a lot of white friends who are not racist, who love to be around minorities. So Donald Trump, unfortunately, has brought out that base of Americans who are still prejudiced, still racist, still threatened by minorities. And he's speaking to them and he's trying to hammer down on them. But people, we got to wake up and we got to get rid of this, because this is not America. This is not what we're going to be about. And if we want to make our communities better, it starts by voting in November.
Absolutely. And just to end it, we're going to take a break here. Make sure you're registered. Make sure if you're going to get a mail-in ballot, you request it early, and make sure that everything on your driver's license matches what's on your voter registration, because they will turn you away in some states for one letter being wrong or out of place or anything like that. So we live in a world where they are looking for reasons to not let you vote. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't try so dang hard to make sure that we didn't have polling places and we couldn't vote. So make sure you have your T's are crossed, your I's are dotted come November 3rd to make sure that your voice is actually heard and your ballot doesn't get kicked out because one letter is wrong on your address. So with that, we're going to take our next break. This is our last break. We're going to come back with some what we call quick hits, and this is just some real quick news from around the country that you may have missed out on this week. So stick with us. You're listening to the Black Agenda Podcast.
All right, viewers, welcome back. So we're going to wrap up this first live edition of our weekly roundup with our quick hits. So one story that I saw was whenever the Washington Post put out an article about the Trump company making money from the U.S. government. And this is important just because, in our Constitution, we have the Emoluments Clause, which says that the president and members of Congress are supposed to make a salary, but they're not supposed to make any other money off the U.S. government. But we've seen from the Washington Post reporting that the Trump organization has made nearly $900,000 off of taxpayers because as Trump travels, he gets the Secret Service to stay in his resorts rather than, staying in something that may be more, affordable for the American people. And to top it off, some of these extra fees that are charged to the Secret Servicemen, like, $1,300 to remove furniture, which is really weird, or extra resort fees. So regardless of how you feel, we shouldn't be paying him more than his salary. He should only be making that from the American people.
Right. And so our next story is going to be coming out of Florida. So there was a Florida teachers lawsuit. So the Florida Education Association, the teachers union, sued the state because the state was requiring all districts to do 5 days of in-person learning. And so the judge actually ended up siding with the union and said that locally districts would know how to best serve communities instead of the state coming down and saying that teachers had to do 5 days of in-person learning. And so the motion was filed, but of course the Florida Education Association filed an emergency motion for the ruling to stick. But that really signifies that there is a division amongst what some of the teachers in the country want, and leaders and politicians trying to shove them and push them back to go back to school during a coronavirus pandemic.
And celebrating the 57th anniversary of the March in Washington, where Dr. King did his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. We had thousands this week take to the streets and march again. This year's march was entitled "Get Your Knee Off Our Neck March on Washington." It was a response to all of the police brutality that we've seen this year, really trying to say, hey, let's do some change. We got to get some initiatives, some reforms. Not only do we need to address the police brutality, but I think they also talked about healthcare, economic justice still, because much like, those years back when Dr. King gave that famous "I Have a Dream" speech, we're still fighting for those same issues.
And our next story is going to be about the economy, just an update. Many of the stock markets have pretty much made up all the gains they lost due to the pandemic back in March and April. The thing about the stock market, though, is not the best indicator of how Americans are actually doing. And so millions of people continue to be unemployed. The extra unemployment benefits have already expired, and the government has not reached a deal in extending those. Trump did sign an executive order, but that still has left many people out, and they're not getting their benefits right now, which is putting them at risk of becoming homeless. So the stock market, it has pretty much rebounded, but normal everyday Americans like us here on this live stream are still struggling.
And just to go to Capitol Hill and to go back to voting, there were actually two Secretary of States, one Republican, one Democrat. So we got, opposing views there. But during the Capitol Hill, we had a House panel committee to talk about mail-in voter fraud and kind of the voice that Donald Trump has said that it's going to be a lot of fraud due to mail-in voting. However, both the Democrat and the Republican Secretary of State, they had actually already expanded mail-in voting in their state. They are behind mail-in voting. They have said that there's not going to be any widespread voter fraud influx just because of mail-in ballots. So they're basically trying to reassure us that you can turn your vote in by mail this year. Don't listen to Donald Trump, who's told you that if you mail in your ballot, it's not going to be counted or somebody's going to change it. We've got people who have done this for years and years and years telling you it's okay to drop it in the mail.
And our next story is really a sad one. And this news broke yesterday. But we all probably know him from starring as Black Panther. But Chadwick Boseman, he died of colon cancer last night at the age of 43. And I was unaware of this, but he had been diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer back in 2016. And if you know his career, you know he put out some major movies between 2016 and now, including Black Panther, The Five Bloods. He did Marshall, and he also played Jackie Robinson in the movie 42. And he did all that while juggling surgeries and chemotherapy. And he gave us some incredible movies. And so to lose him last night, this year we have just lost so many incredible people, and 2020 continues to take those away from us. But Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther star, did pass away at the age of 43 last night from colon cancer.
And our last little quick hit, not to end on another bummer here, but climate change is real. We've seen that Hurricane Laura made disaster in Louisiana. I don't know if y'all are religious, but pray for them if you are religious. If you're not, send them good vibes, thoughts, whatever you can do. Send them donations. I mean, it was a Category 4 hurricane, 150-mile-an-hour winds. Death toll right now is at 14. So everyone's seeing the footage. Everyone's seeing the flooding, the power lines, the trees. They need some help. And, you know, with what's going on, I believe FEMA budget was cut a little bit due to Donald Trump. So it's not a good time to be cutting FEMA. Send your thoughts, prayers, money, whatever you can do. Another thing with the climate change here in my home state, we're seeing a lot of wildfires. Two among the largest wildfires in the state's recent history. I mean, there's 2,000 square miles of wildfire that's acres have been burned. Firefighter resources are at the breaking point. So again, to my previous statement, climate change is real. It's not a hoax. We've got to start addressing it because we see from the science that the hurricanes are getting worse, more fires every year in California. So we've got to wake up and smell the roses, drink the coffee, and get our act in order.
Definitely.
So man, Devin, that was our first live session. You know, I'm happy about this. You know, I'm happy that we got people who are willing to give up some time on a Saturday to watch us, listen to us. You know, they always say sit back, listen well, as we lay it down to you. So it was really awesome to do this.
Definitely. I was nervous at first, but once we got into it, it's a breeze, and you're really just kind of speaking your mind. So, everyone, if you're still with us, make sure you put in the comments what you think. Give us your thoughts. Like it, share it on Facebook, encourage other people to watch it. We're going to try to do this hopefully on a weekly basis, if not bi-weekly, to be able to bring you the news, in our world and tell you what's going on and keep you informed of what's happening. So, with that, of course,
hey, you never know. But you never know. You may see us on, CNN, MSNBC, or hey, we might get bold enough to get on Fox, because I think they probably need some people like us to fill their minority quota.
Hey, in this environment, everybody's looking for diversity right now. So maybe we can pitch it to Fox. So. With that, we appreciate y'all sticking with us. We got about 5 people on, so thank y'all for sticking with us. Again, put your thoughts and your comments in the comment section. Posted it. Let us know what you think. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Black Agenda Pod. And you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to your music and podcasts. You can find us. Just search at Black Agenda Pod. And so with that, we'll catch you next time.